Today is March the 21st. This is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. My name's Dick Rhodes. I'm the chairman of the committee, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. So if you can stand so we can pledge allegiance to the flag. I should say that I call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. We've established a quorum, so all of our members are here. We do have an amendment, a proposed amendment for the meeting minutes of March the 7th. And that amendment is the insertion in 3.02. Committee member Gary Bosak engaged Cliff Swan in a conversation about increased golf rates and the projected number of rounds, indicating that we may be too optimistic in anticipating the golf business and will provide an additional $700,000 in revenue next year over the current. $550,000 of the increase is revenue attributed to non-resident play and budget. This is an amendment to include that verbiage in the minutes. So do we have consensus on that? All those in favor? Opposed? So moved. The minutes are amended and the minutes are accepted. Our first order of business this morning is our February 2023 financial review by our CFO, Cliff Swan. Mr. Swan?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Director Rhodes. All right, let's get started. So taking a look at February financials year to date, keep in mind that as we close these months, we'll update the budget projection, and this budget projection in the packet incorporates the February actual. So now it's July through February actual plus projected March through June. Okay, looking at the summary of revenue, we came in 76,000 favorable to budget on revenue. We were able to, in spite of the weather that we had and the frost delays for the month of February in golf, we were able to hit our revenue number in golf and almost rounds. We were still a little light on budget to rounds for February on budget, which the budget was 320,000. And so I believe it was about 800 short on rounds. We had a round short, but we were still able to hit our revenue number in golf. So total 76 favorable. Oops, sorry. Looking at expenses, continue to battle the inflation and inflationary pressures. There's also some timing items in here, landscape maintenance. Talking with Todd, he's confident that we should be able to pull that even or close to even by the end of the year on the landscape maintenance. However, we will show a difference in there because of the seed prices came in a little higher than we anticipated. So 69,000 unfavorable in golf maintenance. Wages and benefits still experiencing those expenses due to health insurance, as well as we filled some long overdue seats in the landscape maintenance world. So that's kind of reflecting that in that labor number as well. So total income from operations for the month of February is unfavorable by 56,000 because of those items we discussed. So looking at year-to-date summary revenue, we're 247,000 favorable. And then 275,000 unfavorable in, I'm sorry, that number is not correct. Oh, no, it is. Oh, sorry. 275 unfavorable on expenses. Again, the wages and benefits and landscape maintenance, which I talked about. And then supplies and services, that's strictly just inflation and gas prices affecting that. Year to date, 28,000 unfavorable to budget and income from operations. Looking at prior year, we are fighting the expense line item, which has been mostly budgeted for, but we knew that wages and benefits are a huge portion of that, and we knew that that was going to be a challenge for us this year as we operate the association. So $1,062,000 attributable to wages and benefits, $267,000 due to repairs and maintenance and landscape maintenance for the things that we talked about earlier, as well as supplies and equipment at $187,000 unfavorable. Looking at the detail of the capital related items, asset preservation fees to budget we're still running behind budget by $86,000 for the month of February. APFs are home sales are down 20% to budget and 33% to prior year. So, that's why it's important when we look at budgeting that we don't put all our eggs in that basket. And then we swung the other way on our realized, unrealized gains and losses for the month of February. However, March is swinging back, so that'll continue to swing, unfortunately. But that's the scenario we get into when we look at monthly. But in terms of investments, we did experience a market change in the month of February overall by 747. Looking at the compared to year to date, the APFs are reflected at their year to date 393,000 unfavorable. One good note is the investment income. With those swings that we're getting in the market, we do have an opportunity there, and we've had 136,000 favorable investment income in this environment, which is a good thing. And then looking at the unrealized gains and losses, 722, which is that 1 month swing, attributed to that 1 month swing. And looking at prior year, there's that 33% number that I talked about earlier in APF fees, unfavorable by 815,000. Investment income, favorable by 156,000, and then last February through April were the toughest months in the investment valuation change, and you can see that we were 1.2 million unfavorable for the month through the month of February last year versus 722 unfavorable this year. APFs 33%, and then reserve fund valuation change there at 520, but the investment income is the real number there, which is a favorable number for us. Overall revenues over under expense to budget, million unfavorable, mostly due to the capital related of the 727 in valuation change, but also APF fees. Versus prior year, $1,006,000 unfavorable. Again, in the budgeted operating expenses that we knew we budgeted for those, the change in the operating expenses. Switching over to capital expenditures, on a $10.8 million capital budget. We currently have basically a balanced capital budget there. And then we're projecting to be favorable by 15,000 by the end of the capital cycle. And then this crazy spreadsheet is the details behind those numbers. And the highlighted yellow items are the items that are completed and paid for, and how we arrive at those projected favorable of 15,000 on those projects. If we look at the allowances portion of the capital spend, budgeted is 400,000. POs issued on that 400,000 are roughly 203,000. So with an unspent balance of 197,000 on the budgeted allowances. And the details behind that spend are here. I will note that the ARC storage area of 20,000 and the library storage container, both of those were funded by those clubs. So we used allowance money to pay for it, but we received that money in funds from the clubs. They paid for those items. Looking at the reserve fund and what we project based on current, the big mover here is the valuation, reserve fund's valuation change of 722,000, budgeted 50% FFB percent, and it's tracking about 48% when we incorporate that along with these other items, the APFs and the other kind of smaller items at the top. And that's the end of the February presentation.
Cliff, I have a question. I have
Sure.
actually a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
One of which, and I think this is just editorial, and I said this before and I want to say it again, $815,000 on APFs. I mean, that's where we are below what we had budgeted. You know, that's alarming. And I think it's something that this committee understands that. You know,
Yes.
we understand the seriousness of that.
Yeah, if you remember, we put together a budget last year, and we got to the last day, and we had to make a decision on how we were going to get to the reserve fund
Right.
number that we needed to, and we basically did what we had to do, and we put a lot of our eggs in that APF basket, unfortunately, subject to market change, and yeah.
I guess I just want to say that to me, I think that's just a very dangerous thing to do. So I want to comment on the investment change. You said it's $156,000. Let me tandem that with, we have cap trust coming in. Would you remind me of the date that or have we settled on a date yet for them to return?
I believe they're coming May 2nd.
May 2nd. Okay.
Yeah.
So that'll be a very interesting time.
Yes.
It'll be kind of a nervous time for them as well.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
Okay, May 2nd.
Yeah. And there's some other things we're going to discuss at that meeting, not just the normal quarterly performance, but some things we're doing for planning when it comes to the reserve fund, because we're looking at drawing from our reserve fund this year a significant amount because of the encumbrance and the large capital spend of this year with the irrigation project. So we have to plan for that, and we are planning for that. So the strategy behind that and kind of like an editorial of how we're doing that will be presented as well.
Which leads me into my final two-part question.
Okay.
One of which, and you touched on it, about start drawing for the large capital expenditure. When would we expect that, to see that?
The draw. So we're going to do it over time, and we're going to do it strategically, and we're going to do it in a way that it has the least unfavorable impact. And we're in the planning process for that now. The good thing is the 3.2 that we put in December was parked in short-term investments that, worst case scenario, we would have a small impact in the valuation, but then as we liquidate this stuff, we can still put it in short-term investments, which are yielding 4.5% right now. So we should be able to do it in a way where we minimize any realized losses and maybe realize some gains at the same time.
And just to clarify short-term investments, by that, you're still talking short-term bond investments.
Correct. Yeah.
So then the final part of that, Cliff, is you said that right now, at this moment, we're looking at about a 54% for the reserve fund. Do I understand you correctly to say that that will project out to a 48% at the end of the year?
Yes. So yes, you're correct. With the valuation change at what it's at right now.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you. But tandeming on to that last remark, we're projecting 48% at the year, but we were hoping to be at 50 at the end of this year, weren't we?
Yes.
That's what I thought. That's why we've got to, that crystal ball can get kind of blurry, can't it?
It can, yes. I mean, so you have the valuation change, and then you have the APF impact.
That's right.
And that's driving that down, that 2% down.
Speaking of your crystal ball, when you looked into that a year ago, looking at labor and where we would be the 1st of January this year,
Mm-hmm.
do you remember what you were predicting and then what it actually was?
I had we budgeted a 5% increase for minimum wage,
Mm-hmm.
and it came in at 9%.
Yeah. So that's a significant part of
Yes.
of why the wages are up. And
It is.
and that's just one of those things that, none of us can foretell the future.
Yes.
We're keeping a close eye on the APFs for this year. In fact, I think there's going to be some changes in the budget, or you change the budget to reflect a lower amount.
Yes.
With what we've had now through February, what you're seeing in March, do you know how we're going to track this year? Do you have an idea of is it coming in better or worse than we thought?
So right now for March, we are at 80%-ish. It just kind of depends because of the way that the weeks fall. So it's a little soon to tell, but we're tracking it.
Do we think what we're putting in for next year is still, I think we're at 1,014, aren't we, for next year?
Yes, and we're projecting 1,012 for this year.
1,000, okay, so that's close.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Bognato?
Thank you, Dick. Can we go to the third slide, which is summary of expenses February, just for the month, please?
Sure. There we go.
Top line there, wages, benefits, taxes, $72,000 unfavorable variance. And then going forward to the February year-to-date is $75,000 unfavorable. So it sounds
Yes.
like a lot of that 75 took place in February alone.
Yes.
Is that because of the minimum wage increase?
It's minimum wage. It's the new insurance rates at 34% increase when we budgeted 15.
Gotcha.
Also, yeah, so it's the impact of those two items
Gotcha.
mainly.
Okay.
Yes.
So we had been doing fairly well up to that point, and then
Yes.
beyond our control.
Correct.
Okay, going a little bit further, going to summary of capital related, it's about 5 or 6 slides forward.
The actual, the budget?
Actual February,
Okay.
I'm sorry, the year to date, so I think it's the
Okay.
next one.
Yes, sir.
So we're showing a $722,000 unrealized loss, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I understand what that is, and I understand that you mark your securities down to market, particularly if they're mutual funds. But there's a lot of chatter in the community. People, oh my God, they lost $4 million. Well,
Yeah.
I think that some education to the community is needed such that they realize that this is no different than what happens in their own personal portfolios. We didn't actually lose $4 million. We may eventually see those securities, whatever they happen to be, come back up again. And I don't think that they'll be screaming bloody murder when they see realized and unrealized gains.
Yes, and there's right. So you have to remember that when it's positive as well. So our investment strategy is based on a long look at the bond portfolio, and that's our strategy. So
course.
we have to absolutely keep that in mind. And you're correct. If there is that perception in the community, talking about it right now as we are, and I appreciate you bringing that up, but also doing some more education on that would be beneficial.
Okay, that's all I have.
Could I just add to that? And Frank, I think you bring up an excellent point. We also need to look back historically and see that the governing board, on behalf of the homeowners, made a decision several years ago to change our investment portfolio in the interest of asset preservation. Now, if we had a crystal ball, 3 years ago, maybe not, we would have changed to something else. But right now, we're following through with strategy that has been established for the past 3 years. And as Frank says, it's unrealized, and it's only a loss if you make it a loss. If we sell it, we lost it.
That's correct. And that's
Okay.
why planning for this.
And that's why when you look at your own portfolio, your own 401, you have to look at that, you take a deep breath, and you say, oh my goodness, now I need to really hold on to this. And that's where we are.
Yeah.
So thank you. Christine?
Yes, one more clarifying point, because we're using financial terms and market trading firms terms, and we've had some homeowners come here and make comments and probably talking to us individually as well. We're not, some of these losses are exchange traded funds that are invested in bonds. So we're not more than, we're adhering to that strategy that you were just talking about. So when Mr. Bagnata was mentioning securities, they are invested properly in bond funds. They are funds, but they're still bond-related funds. I just wanted to point that out in case anybody is here or listening back later. Thanks.
Mr. Bosak?
Thanks. Thanks, Cliff. Last meeting on the overhead you showed us for the reserve fund for the next 5 years, it struck me as odd that the 5th year you had very little capital spend in that particular year. And my question is, what has our plan been in relating to the irrigation systems and the other courses that are going to be done over the next 4 or 5 years? I didn't see a huge jump. Obviously, they're not the extent of Grandview's $7 million, but in 2 years we're going to do, is it Echo?
I believe so, yes.
And then Pebblebrook, probably 2 more years beyond that, and then Stardust 2 more after that.
I think it's Stardust then Pebblebrook, and I don't believe Pebblebrook is in that modeling.
Okay.
So that happens in 29, I believe. But I can get you the details on that.
But I just
year it
didn't.
hits.
I
But
just
you're
didn't see
correct.
the jump in the numbers that would reflect a $3 or $4 or $5 million expense. The shorter courses probably won't be that, but Pebblebrook certainly would.
Okay, I'll have that slide up, but so it's every other year.
Right.
So by the time we hit that every other year, Pebblebrook's not in the. I believe the planning and the architecture part of that is in there, which is very small compared to the grand scheme of the project.
To touch on that just a little bit, the other courses that we're dealing with, Grandview in particular, we do have 40 acres of turf coming out, and the other courses are in the teens. And so Grandview turf removal alone was close to 2 million, 1.9, and that's the difference in price.
Great, thank you. This is a curiosity more than anything, but how do we miss depreciation by $230,000? That to me seems like a fixed number. Just,
It's all based on when we close projects. So let me see. Are you talking about over prior year, or are you talking about?
yes,
So over prior year makes sense. Over budget wouldn't make sense, but so over prior year, we're not projecting. So you're talking about the 131.
yes,
Okay.
the budget.
Yeah, it's just all timing of when we close the projects.
So
but
that'll flatten out.
yeah, it does. But yeah.
It just seems with your ace record keeping that
We
that's a
probably
hard one to miss.
we probably could have done a little better job on that
problem.
depreciation projection.
Cliff, did you present both the capital and the budget at this time? You don't have a second presentation, or do you have? a
Yeah,
second?
so there is a second presentation.
Okay, let's, if you're done with that, I guess I'd like to ask anyone in the audience if they have a question. Okay, so Cliff, if you could proceed to your second presentation,
Okay.
please.
All right. As I said earlier, we did update this for February actual, so some of the projection numbers changed a little bit, but overall, not much of a change in the projection for fiscal year '23. I believe it went down about 50,000 based on the actual numbers versus projected numbers for February. So you'll see some of these percentages kind of swung. They might have swung 0.2% that made them raise to 6 or 7 or 7 or 8 or whatever. But at the end of the day, 1.3 million in increases in wages and benefits for a total of 8%. 400 of that associated to benefits and taxes. 904,000 associated with salaries and wages. Again, labor challenges. We're fighting. We're fighting competition in the market for labor, and then we're also insurance premiums are a significant portion of that as well. So when we look at that total increase in labor and benefits, 904,000 is associated with the labor. So that's I roll in that labor number, the salaries and wages, the payroll taxes, and retirement, because they're all tied together. So that's how I come up with that 904,000 of the 1.3 million. And associated with that, our minimum wage increase, which we're budgeting $1 this year. We don't want to get caught again like we did last year. And also a 3.5% merit raise increase for all other non-minimum wage employees, and that'll cover some of the things that we need to do as well with compression due to the minimum wage increase and the competitive labor market. Some positions, IT, safety, that kind of thing, we have to take a look at some of those positions and get on the market on those. And we've talked about those at various meetings. So 904,000 for that. Now, when we take a look at our labor allocation by employee pay type, so we've got 4 employee pay types. We have salaried employees, we have hourly full-time employees, and we have hourly part-time employees and minimum wage employees. So when we take a look at that 904,000, one of the questions that was brought up was, how does that attributed to those different labor types or employee pay types? So 23% of that 904,000, which is salaries, wages, payroll taxes, and retirement, is associated to salaried employees. 46% to hourly full-time, 9% to hourly part-time. Obviously, they wouldn't have retirement, but they do have salaries and wages and payroll taxes, and 22% to minimum wage employees. So when we look at that FTE trend from 313 in 2020 to 285 in 22, we budgeted 291 for this year, and we're budgeting 293 for next year. if we look at the breakout by those employee types, the FTEs associated by those employee types, those employee pay types, we have 43 salaried FTEs. We have 157 full-time hourly FTEs. Those are 1 for 1. And then when we look at part-time hourly and minimum wage, we have 118 part-time employees in this budget, which equate to 43 FTEs. And we have 163 minimum wage employees, or their wages tied to minimum wage, so they might be minimum wage plus $1, depending on what position they have. That's 50 FTEs for a total of 293 FTEs. Now, when we look at the change of FTEs year over year, so fiscal year 23 budget, or fiscal year 24 budget versus fiscal year 23 budget, this is how that shakes out. So when we look at the administrative division, we're budgeting 1 extra FTE year over year. For golf maintenance, we're budgeting 6 increase in FTEs in golf maintenance year over year. Staying level on golf ops, staying level in sports pavilion, and then reducing recreation by 5, the recreation division. Recreation, when we talk about recreation division, we're not only talking about the employees associated with the rec centers, there's also a category within that called landscape maintenance. And those landscape maintenance workers report to Todd, who is also golf maintenance, but they manage all of the facilities, all the common grounds that are associated with the association. So it's not golf courses that they're managing the parks and the common areas. Okay, all right. So when we look at these FTE changes, so we had 1 change in administration. We added 1 FTEs, and we took a look at and did an organizational restructuring. Okay, and through that process, we added a reserve study analyst. Okay, and then that person is responsible for the asset management, cash reserve fund, and cash reserve fund investments. There are some communities that outsource this to the tune of 6+ figures. Okay, we're doing this in-house. And the reserve study in this position, this reserve study, as you can see on the modeling, is very important to how we model out what our FFB percent looks like. And it all ties together. And this is a very important position, and we got the right person doing it. Okay? If we look at golf maintenance, we added 6
Cliff,
FTEs.
If I could interrupt you, I want to comment on that because the person that's in that is the one that's responsible for helping us with these short-term and bond investments.
Correct.
And we have already $50,000 that
Yeah.
that we've gained on that.
Yeah, so we'll have 50 to 60,000 this year and 100 budgeted for next year, 100,000 in investment earnings, short-term investment earnings with our operating cash that this person has identified. And we went through the process of allocating those funds in short-term investments to take advantage of the market right now and what's going on with Treasury bills, yes.
And just to be clear, we would not have had that money if we hadn't have done that and had that person in that role.
Yes, I would say that, that this person, Pete, drove this decision-making process, and kudos to him for doing that. And it was a great move. So yes.
Susan?
Yes, I have a question, and that's regarding landscape maintenance of the common areas.
Okay.
When I go down, for example, Camille de Sol, and I'm looking at a lot of the businesses that have certain, or should have nicely landscaped areas, who is responsible for that? Like you take the, trying to think of some of the businesses on Meeker Street, on Meeker Boulevard, as well as on Camille del Sol. How is that set up?
That's maybe a question for Bill. The business owners take care of those specific areas, but the common areas and the roadways and those type of things is Maricopa County, I believe, yeah.
It's the county that
Yeah.
takes care of the roads,
Yeah.
and the business owners,
Take care of the, along the road, just as we do on, where our property, like the palm trees and things like that, we take
Sure.
care of those.
I mean, Sun City West does not own that property
No.
where the businesses are
Oh, no.
located. Okay.
Nope.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the 6 FTE increase in golf maintenance, we're getting back to normal staffing levels in that area. And in speaking with Todd, Todd will tell you that he's still trying to get healthy. If you talk to him, he needs 20, 30 more people in that area. We were able to fill positions this year that we haven't been able to fill in a couple years. And with that being said, we're addressing that labor shortage in that area. We're currently at 83 of those 86 positions are currently filled. And there's three in the budget that are not filled in golf maintenance that Todd has asked for.
Ms. Brown?
I've been involved in the budget for 3 years, and it's always been my understanding that we budgeted for our needs, whether they were full or not. In fact, I even brought up the question one time is, why are we not budgeting them at like 95% because we don't fill them?
Yeah.
So now you're saying we're gonna fill to what we need. We haven't been doing that in the past because I'd always been led to believe we filled to what we budgeted to what we needed.
Yeah, so, and maybe that was my fault, okay, last year. But
Well,
when
I've
you're-
been
when you're
talking about the
looking at-
last few years, so.
Yeah, when you look at, a 10%, 8% increase, when 65% of our overall expense structure is associated with wages and benefits, and you're looking at a 2.4% dues increase, man, you're squeezing it. And Gary said it best, sometimes we have to pull a rabbit out of a hat. We're trying to do what we can, to budget what we can.
Right,
to-
but I'm
to
talking
do
about the number of FTEs that we're now adding 6. I've always been led to believe that we were budgeting for what we needed every year, whether they were full or not. So now we need 6 more?
Yes, and I would say that we've budgeted historically, if you go to the FTE trend, and I don't have the budgets for fiscal year in front of me for fiscal year 21 or 20 or 19, but we probably budgeted for 95 to 100 landscape maintenance workers back then, and because we had 94 positions filled back then. So I said it might be my fault that I didn't budget for those last year because we haven't filled them, but I didn't budget for them last
Well,
year.
I've been looking at this for a few years because I used to budget FTEs, and I know sometimes we didn't budget 100% because we knew they wouldn't be filled.
Yeah.
And I was always told. So I'm still, the 6 FTEs are still kind of niggling at me.
Okay, so are you saying that they aren't needed, or?
Well, I'm surprised we haven't been budgeting for them because I was always told we budgeted for what we needed. So what has changed? Is there more work that has to be done? Is there?
Yes. So there's work that hasn't been getting done, and there's also been work that's been put on the backs of others in the form of overtime.
But
So-
those are still hours that add into it, that make up an FTE.
They are.
So if the
Yes.
hours were being spent, that was FTEs, whether they were people or the hours that people worked.
Okay, I can speak for the budget last year, and I should have budgeted for 86 plus. Maybe I should have budgeted for 94, okay? So to answer your question, I should have budgeted for what we needed last year. I didn't, okay? And
I
I
don't know
am
if I've
I
got
am
the-
doing that this year.
I'd like to see what we budgeted.
Absolutely, I'll get it
and,
for you.
For the last few years, how that was budgeted.
Absolutely. I could
Okay.
tell you what it was, the actual FTEs for the last few years.
I know what the actual were, but I'd like to know what we budgeted because
Okay,
budget to budget is a better barometer for me
okay,
when we're doing a budget.
okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So, in the
We have one more question. Mr.
Oh,
Bozak?
sorry.
I just want to say, we've been nudging you for a couple of years to respond to the wages. And what you're showing has been achieved, I think, is a credit to someone in the organization, or maybe the entire organization. But we all know that we've been very, very deficient in the maintenance of our golf courses. Most of the work is done in the summer. The winter's kind of the easy time, so keeping the people we've got is going to be critical. But you've really attacked it on every front. You made some adjustments. You put incentives in. You wound up having to respond to the minimum wage increases at the same time. But this is the best we've been in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, and you could see in golf maintenance, I mean, in 2015, we had 104 actual FTEs in there. Well, I can promise you the budget was more than 104. And in 2020, we had 94. I can promise you the budget was more than 94. And last year we were at 80. And this year I'm budgeting 86. So, but I'll get those budget numbers together so you have them so you can compare budgets to budgets.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so in recreation, we've reduced 5 FTEs, and 3.5 of those are associated to overnight cleaning crew that we have a cost offset there. It's a small savings, but a cost offset there, and that resides in the expense category of outside services. So there's an offset to that FTE. So and then a 1.5 FTE reduction in landscape maintenance workers on Todd's team. So that's a reduction of 5 for an overall increase in 2 FTEs. But if you add those 3.5 back, it's an increase in 5.5 FTEs year over year, which is basically the 1 FTE added admin and the 6 FTEs added in golf maintenance. Ten-year trend, just put it in there for reference, but you can see what the FTEs have done since 2015. I like to just keep that in there to give perspective on where we're at now versus where we were. So one of the requests as well was a graph showing the health insurance increase from 2020. So put the health insurance cost in here, and we've gone slowly increased at 2.5% in 21, and then you can see what's happened in the health insurance cost. Now, the premiums increased by 34%, but the mix of the employees, whether they have family coverage or single coverage or employee spouse, can affect the cost increase year over year based on that census. So that's why it's not exactly 34%. It could have just the mix of the different types of premiums could be affecting it as well. And we're budgeting a 15% increase there and keeping an eye on that. Okay, so overall expenses, 4%. This also reflects the credit card fees being injected back into the operating expenses for golf, which was the recommendation from the golf committee, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. But before it was 3%, now it's showing 4% because of that, mainly.
I'm sorry, Cliff, to back you up, but I just had a thought. The insurance increase last year, when the folks came in to talk to us about that, was primarily driven by 3 large incident claims.
Yeah.
And I know we now have a new safety officer. Kristen's hired somebody. Is there a chance that maybe next month we could have her come in and talk about how that person's settling in, who's riding herd over those kind of things to make sure we don't have an instant replay again?
Well, that's workers' comp insurance. That's different. But yes, I've got I budgeted a 15% increase in for that as well. And we have those numbers. And I don't know the exact start date of our new safety guy, but we are really excited for him to come on board. And we'll definitely do an update when he comes on board. And I think there was some other demographics that were requested as well that we can work on that too.
Ms. Redmond?
I have a question. I didn't understand what you meant by the credit card fees. When I'm looking at this revised budget and projection, are the credit card fees still in this presentation?
Yes, so I'll explain what the impact of that is year over year. There's a couple components of that. First of all, I still have to budget for credit card fees because the offset to those, I have to book in revenue. So
Yes.
there's a portion of those which are offset in revenue, in other income, and then there's a portion of those that are not offset in revenue, and those are being covered by proposed golf rate increases.
Okay, so the revenue numbers also, if I understand you correctly, right now, whatever rate increases we're seeing are to fees, not to adding that additional credit card expense, or passing it to
Okay,
the payer.
so what's in this budget is what's been recommended from this committee.
Yes.
Which is to pass on the credit card fees, adjusted for the recommendation from golf, which was to increase golf rates to cover their credit card fees.
Okay,
Okay,
So-
so it's a mixture of both,
okay.
yes.
On the fee side, the rate?
Yes, when it comes
okay.
to credit card fees, yes.
All right, thank you.
Director Brown?
I think that goes along with my question. So the credit card fees, we will not see a reduction in the operating expenses, correct?
You will, currently, for everything except for golf.
Okay, so when I look at the operating expenses, what you're budgeting for 2024, is that coming under the financial expense, the 426?
Yes, and if you go to the golf division, you'll see what portion of that is attributable to golf. And if you go to the G&A division or the other divisions, you'll see what portion of that is being offset by other income.
Okay.
Okay, Christine?
With due respect to the entire committee, we are jumping around from piece to piece. Cliff hasn't even gotten to the credit card fees part of the presentation. Am I correct?
Yes, I've got, it's
Okay,
coming up.
so it's coming up.
Yeah.
Can we hold the rest of our questions for anybody else who's not as close to it? I'm confused, and I think I'm pretty close to these conversations, so if we can hold that, and I just want to make one other point, please. You noted in response to Ann's question that you're going to come back to us with, in addition to the FTE actual trend, we're going to
Yes.
have some information about budget, correct? Whatever that
Yes,
is, right?
yes.
Would you please send that to the entire committee, not only to the person who requested it, and do so with more than 24 hours notice in advance of our next meeting?
Yeah, so I'll get it and update it for the governing board presentation, which is on Thursday,
Great.
and it'll be posted out there. So that's one of the changes. Look, see?
Thank you very
Terry's
much.
the best.
I think
Write
that
it
that's a very good idea, Cliff. Let's go ahead and we'll hold our questions
Okay,
until it's rather my fault I started it and I didn't intend to, so.
okay. All right. So getting to credit card fees. So if we look at the surrounding communities, Pebblebrook, the Grand, Sun City Festival, and Sun City, so we like to look at that, and it was one of the things that Bill said, hey, why don't we just see what everybody else is doing with credit card fees? So we did, and Pebble Creek, is charging a 3.5% in membership only, as well as 3% at Grand, and Festival is $1.95 plus 2.95% for all membership transactions as well. And Sun City tags on a processing fee for their events tickets only. So that's what is happening in the world around us when it comes to retirement communities. So the committee recommendations on credit card fees so far have been from this committee, the recommendation to pass on all credit card fees to credit card payers at every point of sale. The golf committee met last week and had a great discussion on credit card fees. And they decided that overwhelmingly that they would rather pay for those fees in increased rates rather than charge that at the point of sale. They thought that that was a better way to generate the revenue and still kept it in the golf community and the people who were golfing. So their recommendation was to increase their greens fees to cover their credit card fees. So out of that So what's the impact of that? Okay, so the impact of that, so this budget that's being presented today, the budget packet, is showing the credit card fees being passed on to the payers at all of our points of sales except golf. Okay? So if you go to the golf division P&L, you'll see that the credit card fees in golf are 250-ish thousand. The other income is 9,000, which isn't pertaining to credit card fees. It's pertaining to other income. Okay? So in golf, the credit card fees are showing on that expense line item with no offset in income. And the impact of that year over year is roughly 300,000, 306,000. Okay, there's some assumptions in there. The assumptions is that members will continue to pay for credit card fees, will continue to pay with credit cards regardless if they're being charged or not. Okay, so that's I budgeted at a 50% rate, but it's cost avoidance, so it's pretty much dollar for dollar, except I built in $1 to $2 for a check that I anticipate receiving or processing fees for other payment types. Okay, and that has a $40,000 impact in the bank fees. All right, and then that the fee we would charge would be 2.65% of the transaction when we do charge the processing fee. So looking at the summary of revenues, overall 7% increase in revenues to cover the $28 million budget we have and expenses. Now, if we look at the surrounding communities on dues again, there's a correction here. Sun City Festival had the wrong percentage in there. It was calculating quarterly versus year. So it's actually a 10% increase at Sun City Festival. All the other communities are 6 to 8% in their dues increases. The point of showing this is to show that these communities are dealing with the same things we're dealing with, which is inflation and supply chain and the labor. It's impacting everybody, and this is what they're doing to help resolve that situation. So the proposed increases from golf are going to generate $1,032,000 in greens fees, and those proposed increases are a non-member rate increase, which we presented last time, of 7.42 during peak and transition seasons, and then nothing in the summer months for non-member golf. And then the change in the member rate increase, the original proposed member rate increase was $1 during peak and transition seasons to cover the labor, to help cover the labor, and combined with the non-member increase to help cover the expense increases year over year. To cover the credit card fees, the recommendation from the golf committee was to go $2 during peak and transition seasons and $1 during summer seasons. That'll generate in total $501,000 in additional revenue based on the golf rounds budgeted at $326,000. Again, same golf card, same food and beverage recommendation. Now, those 326,000 rounds. All right. So we got to this number, and there was a method to our madness. We took our actual rounds, July through January, and added to that prior year, February through June. Okay. That's how we got to our 326,000 rounds. Then at the time in December, when we were making these decisions, at the end of December, we were ahead of budget and a little off from prior year. Now, fiscal year 21, 326,000 rounds. Fiscal year 22, 333,000 rounds. Okay. Now, I was asked to present some more historical averages on rounds. So that's what I'm doing here. So the question was what were our 5-year average rounds before COVID? Because we saw a change in rounds. You'll see in 326,000 in 21 and 333,000 last year. So the 5-year average prior to 2020 was overall 291,000 rounds. And now the 3-year average, fiscal year 20 through 22, is roughly 314,000 rounds. So I just wanted to provide some historical information on what rounds have done over the last 7 or 8 years to give some more impact. I will say February is in the projection of 326,000 rounds. That includes February actual last year. We came in almost 2,500 rounds less than last year in February of this year. So that's gonna impact us in that 326,000 rounds. So we'll have to, again, to Gary's point, we need to look at these and make sure, because we're not tracking what our 2-year average has been at this point. Dick?
Actually, I think Mr. Bagnato had a question earlier. Okay, Christine?
Just a point of clarity. We've spent a lot of time over the past few months talking about golf rates and trends and so on and so forth, but it does not seem that this is the committee that's making the decision on golf rates. Is that correct, Mr. Rhodes?
We do not make that decision.
Okay. Do we make a recommendation on those rates?
Well, that's a really good question. We've
okay.
basically, from a Budget and Finance Committee, we've met our primary obligation of submitting recommendations to the governing board for the upcoming budget. So anything that we do now will be secondary. And if we do make a recommendation to the governing board, I'm not sure how it would be received. The weight that the golf committee gives to the recommendation, I'm sure would pay heavily on the governing board's consideration.
Understood.
If we decide to debate that, I think it would probably be more circumstantial than anything. So.
Thank you for the clarity. I guess I appreciate the information, Cliff, but I don't know if there's nothing, we can have no discussion on this?
Well,
Discussion has already occurred, and why are we hearing it?
I'm confused because at the golf committee meeting last week, they said they were going to forward their recommendation to this committee. So you're telling us we have no input in the finances coming from the golf committee? Because that seems a disconnect to me.
No, I guess part of this is going to be procedural, because I'm not sure how the flow will go. I'm sure that the golf committee has to report to the governing board first. Okay, and from the governing board, then it may be sent back to the Budget and Finance Committee. The ultimate deciding factor will be at the governing board level. So I think that I think we can have discussion on this, but I kind of share Christine's perception here. I think that whatever we do, will be just simply added to whatever the governing board considers. It won't really be a recommendation from us.
They'll have 2 recommendations probably from you and from golf.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will do a recommendation. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about credit card fees and we're talking about how we cover those, I think the input from this committee is important. But the golf committee is the voice of the golf community. So there are different opinions within that, but overall they are.
Yeah, Mr. Bagnato, do you have a question or comment?
This is more of a commentary than anything else, but to put it in perspective, what a $2 increase to resident golf rates for the months from October until May. We're a golf household. Between my wife and I, we're talking 7 rounds of golf a week. We're talking 8 months. There's 4.33 weeks in a month. Put that $2 against all those rounds of golf, And this is costing my family a $485 increase for just 8 months' worth of golf. I appreciate greatly that we've had some frost delays, and it's cost the community some money. We've lost a lot of rounds. But what I'm not seeing at all is a comparison to how golf is doing year to date for February, for 2023 versus how they were originally budgeted. In other words, are they ahead of their budget? Are they behind their budget? We don't know. But that $485 increase for an 8-month period is a pretty significant hit to our family budget. And so I think that we need to go backwards on that. I think that golf's recommendation to not charge the credit card fees, but to go ahead and just put them built into the golf rate, that now turns around and subsidizes people who use credit cards because, and I can speak from experience in the pro shop, not everyone pays with a credit card. People find all kinds of ways to pay, whether it's cash or whether they're using their member credit that went on their account or whether they're using their credit card. But to ask everybody to subsidize the credit card users by increasing the golf rates to cover those credit card fees isn't doing anyone any favors. I also learned this past weekend that we do have the ability to process PIN-generated ACH debits in the golf shop. I learned how to do this. It's very simple. The terminals are already there. And I paid for my golf rates this past weekend using a debit card. So the question that I have after all this talk is, we pay, you said about 2.65% for credit card transactions?
2.71 in golf
Okay.
because
So
of the amount of transactions.
what do we pay for a PIN-generated ACH transaction?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
There is a difference. It's not a huge difference, but there is a difference.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important that we know.
Generally not a major difference.
Okay.
Yeah. And to respond to what we're doing year to date through February versus prior year, we're almost 11,000 rounds off versus budget, we're about 1,900 rounds off.
1,900 rounds off, but there was a big increase in golf rates from last year to this rate. So how, forget the rounds, how are we, I mean, I'm a Coyote card holder and I had an increase in my greens fee prime season over last year of more than 16%. My rate went up more than 16% because Kachina card used to be a 50% discount. Well, now they're tacking on $1 to the standard rate. They're also tacking on that same dollar to the Kachina rate, probably the Coyote rate. And my 50%
Yes.
discount is now below. It's probably about 48.5. Now they want to stick another $2 on, and my 50% discount continues to get eroded. And something's wrong with that picture.
To answer your question on revenue, we are on budget for revenue.
Okay, Christine?
All due respect, Frank, I really think this is I think we're probably causing a bit of a cyclical. I think I did not have a chance to go to the golf committee. I did not know that they were making the decisions about this, or I would have attended. My apologies. But it sounds like a cyclical reference for the staff. I think that they're getting some push and pull, and that may not be fair. Perhaps these points you're making, and any concerns I may have about the rates of golf, whether or not fees are charged. I need to start attending the golf committee meetings as a resident, it seems. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to point that out. I don't want to see necessarily a lot of push and pull to you guys. That doesn't seem like the best use of your time either, so thank you.
Mr. Schwind?
Hello, and Frank, you're sitting down. I just want to say publicly that I couldn't agree with you more. So I don't know if that's a shock to you, but
Somebody write that down, please.
Can I get a warning before that
can I-
next time so I can
Can I
sit
go
down?
back a couple slides, please, where the
Yeah.
title of the slide talks about credit or fees? And I think, back one, that one. All right, let's kind of look at this from a 30,000-foot level, and I think Mr. Miller has a point. Budget and finance is really, really a critical link when it comes to moving recommendations forward to the governing board. This concept here, this philosophy here extends beyond golf, right? It's what are we doing? And so as we kind of have moved in the direction of, with our foot on the gas pedal and opening up all kinds of portals and making it very accessible for, and convenient for people to pay their dues. Credit cards have been a very significant factor in that. And so a few years ago, and I don't think we have the slide in this particular presentation, but a few years ago, our bank fees were $280,000, $300,000. And over the course of time, with people taking advantage of the convenience of credit cards and some of the games that the bank plays with credit cards, be it percentage of payback, cashback, gasoline mileage, airline fees, airline miles, all those kinds of things built into credit card use is a way to get you to use those. And the bank realizes that, and they charge fees for that. So that has increased now significantly in our world, but it's an operating expense, as are utilities, gas, electric, and those types of things, water. So if our fees get increased, those are dollar amounts passed on to our membership, right? I'll take a step back, and my career in municipal government is that of subsidization, right? A lot of things from police departments, fire departments, cemeteries, airports typically don't pay for themselves. Your tax base does. So shrinking that down into Sun City West, our tax base is membership. There's two divisions here that really generate the thrust of our revenue, be it golf, membership. And so is it fair to continue to, and I kind of made a presentation in front of the golf board the other day talking about that and talking about fairness. And I think, Mr. Rhodes, you and I have had a conversation about fairness and made some comments along those lines too. And it's just kind of an interesting concept, but a philosophy thing, or what are we dealing with and what are we doing? Is it a membership due? Is it part of something that should be absorbed? When we communicate with other agencies, 55 plus communities around us, they're seeing the same bank fees as well. And their operational cost is, on a membership scenario, if you're using a credit card, you can basically consider a 3% increase or surcharge on doing that to offset that cost. But the day-to-day spending that the golfers do, or people going into a rec center or buying a hot dog or doing whatever they're doing, is absorbed. And that's just a part of doing business. We've been doing that for years anyway. And that's going to, I think, continue as such. But when it comes to golf, and we're asking golf, or golf has stepped up and increased their rates another $2, like Frank went in and explained, it's sizable. And the golfers are really, really paying $10 million collectively. And the vast, vast amount of that money is generated from owner members. So there's a little bit of a double dip there. They're paying their $509 or $530 or whatever the annual dues tend to be. They're doing that too, but they're also playing golf. And yet we have beautiful facilities around here that owner members take advantage of, be it auto restoration, a wood shop, and a metal shop, and they don't pay a dime to use those facilities. And there's electrical costs that everybody pays for. And so it really kind of, I think, needs to be looked as a philosophy from this group as to where we're going with that. What's fair? And yes, no one wants to see a fee increase. But the fact of the matter is, we have to pay that. 2 years ago, we were paying $300,000 for grass seed to make our winter look wonderful out here in these golf courses, the condition that you all come to appreciate. That's jumped significantly. And the governing board basically wants to maintain the status of what we do here in Sun City West. We're nationally ranked, and I swear to God, we're number one in the country, right? You can go ahead and look at the top 10 out there, but compare them to us, we kill it. We really do. The amenities that we have and the amount of money you pay annually to have these amenities is staggering. It's a wonderful, wonderful place, if not the world's best retirement community. And I'm proud to say that. But, you know, from a philosophical perspective, where are we going here? And that is something I'd like for this board to debate. Don't get into the golf fees per se, but more of a philosophical statement, where are we going? And I'd love to hear your comments. Thank you.
I'd like to actually clarify a point for David. I think we do have I think we do have a possible option here that I'd like to take a straw poll if we debate or if we discuss this, that if we want to forward a recommendation to the governing board, I would be willing to sponsor that to the governing board. But in light of Mr. Schwinn's comments, part of this, we've already made a recommendation to pass the credit card fees on to the homeowner. Now it would require us to back up and say, well, I'm not so sure about that. And we can do that, but our recommendation now is to the governing board to pass that on. I think what we're doing here now is we're looking at the reaction of the recommendation from the golf committee and trying to size that up and see what does that mean. And if we in the Budget and Finance Committee would support that or not support that. So I think that we need to look at this from a financial perspective and limit our discussions to that. And then once we discuss it, and I don't think we need to discuss it for an extended period of time. And then we'll take a straw poll if we want to forward a recommendation onto the governing board. We're not ready for audience comments yet. So I know that we've got people in the audience who want to comment, but let's go ahead and discuss that. So I'm going to put you on the spot, David, if you would like to.
Wouldn't be the first time. Before we start the discussion, I really would like to have somebody go back and really determine the primacy of the committees, because I look at it from the point of view, the golf committee made a recommendation about what the rate should be. What you're telling me, or what other people are saying, is that that recommendation is set in stone. They decide, going to the governing board. Governing board ultimately decides, but they make a recommendation that bypasses the finance committee. You're talking about, as Dick said, one of the two major sources of revenue for the community. In my mind, that just seems out of whack. But that's something that I'd like to have that definitively clarified. Does that bypass the Budget and Finance Committee? Yes or no? Okay.
I don't think it does bypass the Budget and Finance Committee. I think we have a right if we see that to do it. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that we can offer recommendations to the governing board.
Agreed.
And we can have a unanimous recommendation here, or we can have a split vote. And it will be up to the governing board to make that decision.
Agreed.
So whether we make it or the golf committee makes it, I think that we can have a discussion here if we wish to make a second recommendation to the governing board relative to the golf committee. I know that we can't overrule the golf committee. We can certainly just add additional information that the governing board will
Well, I mean, obviously, the
consider.
golf committee is going to make the recommendation. But I guess I'm back to, we don't have to accept if the primacy of the committees is Budget and Finance and then the golf committee. That's what I'm really asking. Okay, and if it turns out that the golf committee is separate, fine. But if it's not, then it's got to flow through us. But that's a different discussion.
Well, it is and it's not, because at the end of the day, the governing board has the authority, or it has,
Agreed.
is the deciding body. And they will take under consideration what we recommend, what all the other committees recommend.
Right.
And then they will sort out
Right, I
and
understand.
make whatever decisions
Right.
that are made.
So I watched the golf committee meeting in its entirety last week, and, Bill talked quite a bit, and Cliff did his presentation, and the golf committee membership reacted to the credit card fees. And I won't go into my perception of the credit card discussion on the golf committee. But what I did walk away with, just the simple math was I had a concern about the second dollar increase, particularly in the summertime. Because it looked to me simplistically as, well, okay, we're going to add that second dollar on a year-round basis. If we're going to play 326,000 rounds, that's $326,000, solving a $200-and-something thousand credit card problem. It looked like we were overpaying. Okay, now I started poking Cliff after I watched that, asking for information like, well, how many of those rounds are in the peak and transition seasons versus the summertime? And then he brought another factor in, which I hadn't considered, which is the people who play on unlimited cards, and there are the employee things, and there's all these different rates, I guess. I don't know what an employee pays to play golf here. But the point, I guess, comes back to what Cliff told me was there's 39,000 rounds that were played in the June through September timeframe. So my concern was the additional dollar was going to overcharge the community. It sounds like maybe, let me finish, Christine. It sounds like maybe we're still overcharging, but not as much as I thought we were. Okay. So I'm feeling a little bit better about that. The other thing that caused me some concern was, again, as Frank alluded to, there's a lot of people that don't pay with a credit card. Okay. And as I alluded to Dick in a conversation before the meeting, I said, I go down and I take cash out. And I go down every 3 months and I pay cash at one of the pro shops and I put it on my member credit. Last time I did that, it took me a whole whopping 90 seconds or less to do that. Okay, someone in the golf committee was concerned that, when people are doing cash transactions, it was going to slow their check-in process down. That kind of seems self-serving to me. But my point is, okay, I'm not burdening the community by having to now pay a credit card fee that they had to absorb. Okay, it's very easy to put money on your card and do member credit. So, when you look at the rounds, there was 100-and-something rounds of golf that were played that were not charged a credit card fee. Now, Cliff tells me part of that's the unlimited card and this, that, and the other. Anyway, I agree with Frank in that it looks like you're asking the cash payers or the people who do like I do and put a lot of money on member credit, you're asking me to subsidize the credit card payers. And speaking for that community, I don't think that's necessarily fair. So I had even gone so far as to say, charge a cash price for a round of golf. Charge a credit card price for a round of golf. Okay, that's a software programming change that wouldn't necessarily cause a lot of grief during the check-in process. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this. I mean, what we're really trying to do is avoid credit card fees, and you're penalizing the people that don't generate those credit card fees already. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Christine, did you have a comment?
I think we'll probably all have several. I just wanted to piggyback on a part of what you were saying about the role of the different committees, not so much the primacy of one committee over another, but we all work together. We're all representing various constituencies. So it sounds, if I'm hearing it correctly, I'm confused about the role of budget and finance since we've spent so many hours talking about fees across our community, but it does not appear that we have the recommendation. I don't want to say jurisdiction, but it's not really our area. So the community, the golf community has spoken, and I would assume therefore that the properties committee is going to have a point of view and a recommendation on APFs. I would assume that the sports and recreation committee will have a recommendation on how to handle bowling fees, et cetera. But regardless, I think that's a governing board question that needs to be sorted out. How do we want the committees to work together? But near term on this, in terms of the golf, I hear what everybody is saying. I too am a golfer, among other activities here. But if in our role as budget and finance, the key thing that I believe we were debating and recommending is that absorbing those big fees is just more than our organization, that we as owners really want to take on. If the golf community has agreed to raise all rates by 3% across the board, then I'm surprised, but that would cover credit card processing fees. It does put more of an onus on the cash payer, as David and Frank and others are saying. But if that's the recommendation, I only want to make sure that we as an overall community are not penalizing ourselves as a community, that we have a way to recoup those processing fees somehow. I do not want a further increase on our membership dues and so forth. So maybe there is another way that we settle all of that. But I only want to see that if I step back from and if I do not comment any further about the various fees, we've spent, and I'd hate to say it this way, we've wasted, I guess, a lot of time debating different fee increases that we have no input on. But we can talk about credit card processing fees and say, as I'm saying now, the recreation center, our membership shouldn't absorb all of those fees. We have, as Mr. Schwind was pointing out, two primary areas: membership dues, inclusive of APFs, as well as the golf community. Those are the primary, and that's where we're focusing right now. If we can find a way to ensure that I, as a member, and my fellow members are not paying all of that, then I think that would be helpful.
I think what we've argued here, or what we've discussed here, is the rethinking of the charging credit card fees. I think that's really what it boils down to. And
Just in one community, Dick, from what I understand.
well,
just
and
golf.
I would comment back that I don't think we've wasted our time in looking at rates. I think that's the deliberation that we have to go through to come to some conclusion on how things build and things. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a straw poll if we should continue with the recommendation as we had originally submitted to the budget or to the governing board to charge the credit card fee to the homeowner, or if we want to exclude golf, because I think that's where the argument is right now. Okay.
But if we exclude golf, then that would be raising the golf fees.
With the stipulation. So basically what we're doing is we would be agreeing with the golf committee.
And we would be, so the idea is either what we said originally was users pay for it.
Users
whether
pay.
they're members or they're
Right.
non-members would pay for the fee. And the other is to go with the golf committee recommendation to raise fees unilaterally.
So we would support the golf committee recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess that's the issue. Do we support the golf committee recommendation, or do we not support the golf committee recommendation? So do we want to, I'm going to take a straw poll to see if we want to pursue that, and then we'll go back and say, yes, I wish to recommend that. And Christine, I'll start with you.
I am not close enough to the golf committee's recommendation. I cannot make a recommendation right now. As long as if the rates really do cover all, are intended to cover all of it, I would have to defer the decision-making to that committee. They seem to have the authority. I don't know what to say. That I'm confused about I want to make sure that the members are fairly treated, that member owners are fairly treated. And I believe our recommendation had the opportunity to allow our membership to effectively have a unique benefit by putting cash on our member card, right? So I see that as a better alternative, but I really don't know what to say in terms of, I can't endorse a recommendation I'm not familiar with. I didn't realize that was part of today's.
Well, I don't think any of us did.
Okay.
So but what you're saying, in essence, what we're saying is that we want to support our recommendation, our
Yeah.
original recommendation.
I support our original recommendation, but I also support my fellow members who put in apparently a lot of time on the golf committee rethinking everything else. So I don't know what to say.
Well,
But
I
I
mean,
do
this-
endorse our original recommendation of allowing our members to have a unique benefit.
This has no disrespect to the golf committee. I mean, they are
Okay.
very learned people, and they're very in tuned with the golf community. So this is their view. And this is actually part of what the governing board's going to have to sort out. You know, so we can tell the governing board that we discussed this at some length, and we took a straw poll, and this is how it came out. You know, so, I mean, whatever the results here are. So,
I continue to endorse our original recommendation.
Mr. Bagnato?
A golfer said to me that he objects to having to pay a fee because he buys his annual card at $3,500 or so expense with a credit card, and he enjoys getting the cash back. My response to the golfer was, so instead of getting a discount for paying cash, you're actually getting a discount for using a credit card, and that's simply not the way the world works. I stand behind our committee's initial proposal to the governing board that fees be charged across the board throughout the community.
Mr. Howald?
Thank you. I'm going to start with a question, Dick. 2 weeks ago, this committee made a recommendation to the governing board. Is there any feedback on how that recommendation was received?
It hasn't formally been presented to the governing board. It won't be until Thursday. But I guess I would say that I don't think anyone was surprised.
We did present that recommendation.
We did at the
Yes.
workshop.
Yeah, oh, yes.
It was
yes.
presented at the workshop.
Correct.
It'll be formally presented at Thursday's governing board meeting. There was discussion, and I don't think they came to any closure, but it was discussed in a very positive way.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's another data point I was looking for in formulating my opinion. And my opinion is that the golf committee has historically managed those rates, as far as I know. And therefore, I think that's a precedent, and I don't think it's something that we've ever gotten involved in. And I've been involved with this committee for 4 years. So I'm going to stick with the same message that Christine delivered earlier. Our recommendation was our recommendation. I haven't heard anything here that makes me want to change that. The principle is the same one that Christine mentioned, and that is that the users should pay for their costs, however that's divided up between the community, but it is not an overall owner-member responsibility to pay those credit card fees if individuals want to use a credit card. So I don't want to see that credit card fees end up in the membership fee. That's my stake in the ground. How it gets divided among the golfers, I think, is certainly within province of the golf committee. Thank you.
So your recommendation is to stick with the original recommendation that we submitted to the governing board?
Yeah, the 3.4, 3.7%
Well,
to
I'm-
5.
Right, I'm talking about the credit card.
Oh, credit
component
card,
of
yeah.
it.
I believe our recommendation, and maybe you need to state it one more time for people like me that just get stuck on it, but it's that the users should pay the fees and the owner members should be indifferent as to whether people use a credit card for convenience or whether they pay. The user should pay, not everybody subsidizing it.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Just to piggyback on a couple of things, you were saying owner members would be paying. The only thing owner members would be paying is if they are a golfer and they pay cash, they'll be paying an extra surcharge to cover the people who use a credit card. So those are the only ones who would be affected, is an owner member who is not using a credit card for golf. Another comment, our chairman, Mr. Rhodes, is correct. This was taken to the governing board in the workshop, but the charge from our president was that we were to look at it, we were to send questions that we had to our president to forward on to the CFO, and we would do a discussion on Thursday at the governing board meeting. So it was just a perfunctory, here is the budget, please take it, please review it, please send questions. So there was not a major discussion on that. We've already had an increase in golf rates in the original budget, is that not correct?
Yes.
And this would be another increase in golf rates, correct?
Yes.
I'm gonna have to stand by the original charge that the user pays credit cards. I don't like passing it on as a blank check, and I suspect we could be collecting more than, and I mean, I think of somebody who goes out and plays, let's say, Twilight golf right now. If I go out and play, or Super Twilight, or whatever they call it, I play cheap golf because I don't play much golf. But if I'm paying $15 right now, which is that a legitimate rate right now for late
I
afternoon?
think 16.
16.
Yeah.
If I pay another $1, I'm now paying 6% more. That's not 2.65% more. I'm paying 6% more for that round of golf. Now, if you get up to somebody who's currently paying 40 and they pay another $1, they're only paying 2.5%. But I still think it should be the user pays. So that's my, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Redmond?
I think I'll have to agree with my colleagues who went before. And the reason, I just don't think it's right to ask the non-credit card, the cash payers, to cover the cost for players that are paying with a credit card. However, I am going to say, looking at this budget that you've put together, the onus now on you, Cliff, is going to be, you've lost revenue. And I guess the onus is on you to go find. Sorry.
Yeah, so here's what I'll say, and keep in mind, the recommendation that came from operations was a credit card increase to members in membership, because they had an actual opportunity legitimate opportunity, alternative to pay. So the recommendation to forward is what's being presented here, what's been presented at golf. That's ultimately up to the board. So just keep that in mind, and it all has an impact on the reserve fund, okay? Because the dollars that we're talking about now are dollars that are going to go into the reserve fund allocation, because we have a balanced budget, okay? So we either create cost avoidance or we create credit card processing revenue, fee revenue. At the end of the day, whatever happens with credit card fees, whether they continue to be absorbed by the community or they get passed on to the payer, will have a direct impact on how much money goes into the reserve fund, okay? So just keep that in mind. And there's a lot of dynamics. I will say it's good that we've heard from the golf community, because I feel like we got one side of the argument last time, right? We didn't really have anybody else talking about the impact of that. So I think it's good we get all this conversation out. The community hears that everybody has a voice, and ultimately the governing board will decide. I think that's the most important part about the recommendation process and the committee process. Okay.
You know, I told Gary a minute ago, I spent almost 4 hours studying credit card fees over the weekend. When I was in graduate school studying quantum mechanics, it was frankly easier. Okay, so, you know, I asked Cliff a question which was really and truly, what is the fee on a $43 round of golf. And because that was the original proposal with the extra first dollar added in, and that would have been the maximum cost. And so what you're telling me is it's 3%?
Yeah, it's about $1.20.
It's $1.40 something if that's the case.
Okay.
So you look at it that way and say even a dollar increase in cost isn't enough in a rate to cover the cost of the credit card. Okay? So I'm back to, you're going to pay for it one way or the other, whether it's a credit card fee or an increase in golf rates. The people need to understand you're going to pay for it one way or the other. Okay? By doing it with the credit card fees being assessed to the people who use them, it's going back to the people who are generating the cost. Okay? It's a simple question of fairness in my mind. So I'm going to vote that we stay with our original recommendation, which is everything gets passed on.
Mr. Bosak?
Thank you. Golf in Sun City West is really cheap. You go anywhere else for the quality of courses that we have, you're going to pay 2 or 3 or 4 times what we pay here. That being said, to Bill's question, we've never been able to convince the community that all of these fabulous facilities we have is what they're entitled to because of what they pay to be a member here. So when you talk about golf or you talk about membership, 2 drivers of a whole lot of revenue in the community, got 2 levers to pull. And golf, you want to keep reasonable, you want to be fair about it. Membership, we keep avoiding the conversation. We spent 20 minutes batting our gums at the last meeting about 42 cents a month difference between 4.19 and a 5% increase in dues. 42 cents a month. We always try to avoid that. It's the elephant in the room. We don't talk about, I mean, we're down over last year in revenue 0.1%. Expenses are up 10.9%. If this was your business, you'd be having a whole lot of different conversation than what we've been having. We got to get real. We got to get some guts. We got to talk about what it's going to take to continue to fund the reserve fund. We don't want to back off our projects. And any way that we can preserve that, we got to take that action. As far as the golf committee, I went to the meeting last week. And if you recall the amended version of the minutes, what I was trying to do was alert folks to the impending danger of increasing our outside play $550,000 out of the $700,000 that they were talking about increasing. It's already down a little bit, and that's first time in a long time. We've ridden that horse for a long, long time, and it's going to come due pretty soon that it's not going to be as big a positive for us as it has been in the past. I urge you to go and look at the golf committee video from last week. Just go to that part where they talked about credit cards. It will be very enlightening to you. I mean, comments like we're gouging people, we're nickel-diming people. How can we avoid this? The community will react very negatively to this. I made a point since our last meeting of talking to as many people as I could about this, and I would say that it was 70-30 that once they were informed, understood what we were trying to accomplish. When you talk about almost $600,000 in expense to the community that we can do something about, which is unusual when we get to something like that, they say, yeah, I understand that. And other people do the same kind of thing. There's that hardcore 30-40% that aren't going to agree to any kind of increase in any way. When you look at what people pay per round of golf, if you got an annual card, over $3,000, make the math easy, and pay 150 rounds, you're paying $120 to play a round of golf. That's pretty darn cheap to play our courses. The golf committee, in my opinion, is one element that this committee has responsibility to pay attention to. We have the total budget at our disposal. Everything on this sheet we talk about, every line at some point or another. Golf's just one of those. So do we have the right to talk about what golf's doing? Absolutely. And when you watch the video, you'll be glad that we do. because there was a lot of conversation going the wrong way. And the reason I went to the meeting, and my comments I had to hold till the end of the meeting, but I said the same kind of thing to them. You can't afford to do what you're going to do with the total rates, first of all, because it's driven by rounds, and our rounds at the time were far too many in our estimate. So if you reduce the rounds to a reasonable amount of expectation, which Cliff is going to do month to month to month, it's going to be revised all the way down to the final budget. Then you look at the revenue, and then you look at the risks. And what our biggest risk right now is putting outside non-member play, at risk. And my whole intention was to alert them to what things that they should be talking about instead of credit card fees. And yet their final decision was if we increase the $1 to $2, that'll cover the cost of the credit card fees and we don't have to nickel dime people. That was the bottom line. But look at it for yourself and you'll see the kind of conversation that was taking place. So in my opinion, we've got $570,000 that we can do something about, and I would say that we stay on our recommendation.
What we have is we're in a position that we've made a recommendation to the governing board on what the Budget and Finance Committee feels the proper thing to do with credit card fees are. We have discussed and we're preparing a response to the governing board of the golf committee's recommendation. So I believe what we have the right to do is we can make a recommendation to the governing board, and I'm going to read something that I just drafted. I have no pride in authorship, so I would be happy to do for any editing. That I want to take we'll take a consensus on this. In response to the recommendation, our recommendation will be, in response to the recommendation from the Golf Committee to eliminate credit card fees in lieu of increasing golf rates, the Budget and Finance Committee does not endorse nor recommend approval. Simple. Okay.
Question?
Yes, sir.
So does it go back to the original recommendation on golf rates, which is the 742 and the $1 during peak and transition season?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now I will ask for comments from the floor before we actually vote, but I want to make sure that this is the recommendation that we're going to be voting on. Does everyone understand that?
I would benefit if you could repeat that one
Okay.
more time.
Thank you.
And perhaps pause at the commas in there so I can absorb it.
Okay. Our recommendation. In response to the recommendation from the Golf Committee to eliminate credit card fees for golf in lieu of increase of golf rates, the Budget and Finance Committee does not endorse or recommend approval. Again, I'm open for if you have something that bothers you about that or you wish to change, I'm open to that. Okay, if not, I'm going to ask for comments from the floor. Any comment? Yes, and if you'd state your name and your rec number, please, rec card number.
Good morning. Paul Heikkinen, 128832. I've been watching these meetings, and in my opinion, things are spinning out of control with this whole credit card business. As Cliff alluded to, you were presented from the management a balanced budget that they felt would be sufficient to cover us for the next budget period. But in the zeal to push these, what I consider ordinary business expenses back onto the users, back onto the members, you've effectively increased the budget by another $570,000 that wasn't even requested for. So then it spins out of control further with the golf committee with the dollar round. So effectively for me, like Frank's point, 250 rounds a year, 250 for the dollar increase, 250 for the credit card increase, $500 for me for credit cards, not even counting my member dues, all the ancillary increases that, I agree are necessary to keep up with things. But my opinion, these credit card fees are ordinary business expenses. They should be absorbed with the ordinary income. You're essentially taking an ordinary business expense, giving it back to the members to pay for. There's an extra $500,000 here that wasn't even asked for. So, I think I covered it. I think this whole thing just spun out of control. I think we should go back to the original budget. If you're gonna continue this road, we go back to the original budget, we gotta find $570,000 of income to take back off again to balance this thing out.
Thank you.
Mr. Rhodes, will you respond?
I will. When you talk about the $500,000, that was actually already in the budget. That was part of what that was already being paid. So.
Right, it was already being paid, but
The credit card fee is to reduce expense.
If you reduce the expense by 570, you're gonna reduce the net income by 570.
No, it doesn't go to that. It just reduces our expenses.
If it
It
reduces your
doesn't,
expenses, it's gonna reduce your net income.
no, it would, it's.
Increase your net income.
Yeah.
correct.
So it's not an additional $500,000.
No, what I'm saying, if you're gonna push this ordinary business expense back to the members of 570,000, reduce that expense by 570, you effectively increase the net income of the rec center by 570.
No. Well, it would be, okay, it would be a cost avoidance.
No,
You're both correct, but that money goes into the reserve fund.
right.
Yes.
Right, but it was not requested for in the original budget. You increased the assessment on the members by 570, which is gonna flow through reserve fund. I understand all that. But is that truly what you wanted to do?
You know, we didn't increase the assessment. All we did is we're asking the homeowners to pay the credit card fee.
You're
So
gonna
that'll
assess
be
them
a
the
co-
credit card fees.
They're going to pay a credit card.
You're gonna
fee.
assess them the credit card fees.
Well, that's semantical, but they would pay the credit card fee. If they use a credit card.
Right, well, even if they don't use a credit card, if they use cash, you reduce that $570,000 expense, same effect, you increase net income. It doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ed Westell, 115908. As far as general comments about the budget, I'd like to talk about another handle other than credit card processing fee. Was talked about by Mr. Bagnato at a previous meeting, and that's the $300,000 charge for the pickleball LED lights. I think a little bit different about that project than other LED lights is that the amount of expense that has to be incurred to change those lights compared to changing lights, fluorescent lights, etc. So if we look at that project as a want versus a need and looking at our shortfall in trying to keep our fully funded budget up, I think that deserves another look. Next point of contention is I think we need to really look this year at the benefits. The last 2 years, the amount of benefits going up, and
You mean for employees?
employee benefits, right? Not the workman's comp, but the health benefits. You've got another 300,000. 300,000 seems to be a point of a number for this year. So I think it was 200 the year before, 300 now. You've got a person looking at that, but strong things to look at is do you change the amount of amount that you pay before deduction, and you start looking at that now, because if I was a betting person, like it takes a lot of effort to change the course of the fully funding of the reserve fund. It's probably going to take it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to 200,000 next year again. And how long can we continue to pay that without maybe somebody like the employees having to, come to the plate for that. Last thing is a positive. Golf equipment usually runs around $1 million. It's the biggest expense other than things like Grandview parking lots. And I looked over what was forecast last year for '24, and the budget is $513,000 less for golf equipment this year. So I think that Mr. Petty and Cliff did an excellent job on getting that down. It didn't really get shown in the budget, but that was really good. This has been kind of a soft spot for me for several years. I've met with previous BNF chairs. I've met with Mr. Schwind and the previous CFO about golf cart requests for golf equipment replacements. And there is a CR1. I don't know if there's a CR1 that covers every piece of equipment. The budget shows see golf tab for all the specifics. This year, we didn't see the specifics on which equipment is being replaced. I've heard that, well, we only replace 3 a year, but it's really not the case of how many you replace. It's what's the criteria that you use for replacing that equipment. We know that the cost of that equipment is going up just like eggs, everything else, so that the amount of expense and downtime that are incurred is going to have to be greater than what it was in the past. So if we got a good criteria for how we do that, I think we can continue to look at the
Thank you.
things.
Thank you. Your time is up, please.
Well, I didn't know we had time.
There's actually a 2-minute limit, and we're well into 3 now, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If you have other things that you would like to add, you can send them to me. I would be more than happy to see them. You can contact me through the governing board for email.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Alan Schlemmer, and my rec number is 137012. And it's been interesting to listen to the discussion on the credit card fees, and I'll be very candid, I have moved all around on this issue in terms of my own thought process. But I do agree with a couple of things that were raised today, and as a resident owner, I wanted to express that support. First, when I was paying my annual renewal this past February, I went in online and I made the payment, and of course, like everybody, I used my credit card, and my reaction was, wow, they're not getting all my money then. I think that Gary or David mentioned earlier, it costs money to run this community, and we're very fortunate to live here. The amenities are fantastic. I agree with Mr. Schwinn that we are absolutely the best. I've seen the villages, they got nothing on us, but it costs money to run this community. And I do agree that the community should receive and should have benefit of the entire net revenue of the membership bills as presented. So if I want to use a credit card, I should have to pay for the privilege of doing that. Otherwise, I either mail a check in, I come by the membership office, or I do an e-check online if that service becomes available. So there, I completely agree. The golf area, when I walked in the meeting this morning, I was more along the lines of credit cards are a cost of doing business. You go to the grocery store, people pay with credit cards and so forth. And the practical reality is that using the $250,000 and the 0.0271 fee charge, roughly 9.3 million of our golf revenue is paid by credit card. Now, I don't know if that's exact. That's me just doing the math. But the point is a lot of folks do use credit cards. But on the other hand, what compelled me to change my position was the comments I referred to earlier. It costs money to run these golf courses. And I'm not a golfer, but I absolutely appreciate the beauty of those courses when I drive through this community every single day. And I appreciate the value they add to the community. So I finally came full circle, and I actually support, I started out not, I actually support the decision that we should pass those costs on. Just as, you go to the gas station today now in many places, not so much here in Arizona, but unfortunately our grandkids are in California. You go out there and there's a 10-cent gas per gallon difference. You can either walk inside and pay cash, or you can pay at the pump and use your credit card, and you pay a convenience fee for that. You pay this, basically you pay the fee. So I support the idea of The net revenue to this community should be the revenue that we charge at the door. And if you want to have the privilege of using a credit card and so forth, exactly where you guys came, I think your recommendation is right. I fear raising the rates in terms of golf. Roughly $2 million of our revenue comes from sources outside of this community. It's 20% of the revenue, give or take. I like that that's there because it does help to reduce the cost to us. And if we start to raise fees and over again, we become non-competitive. And I think Ann Brown pointed out, if you pass the credit card fee on, it's 0.0271, 3%. But if you go up a dollar here, a dollar there, it might be 6 or 7%. I think being honest with people and saying at the end of the day, this is the fee, I think that's the right way to go. Thank you very much, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
This goes back to what Paul had said earlier. So if we decide that we're going to charge the credit card fees across the board, including golf, an expense of approximately $570,000 comes out of the P&L for the budget for next year. So that 570 gets wiped out. It's no longer there. We then begin taking in credit card fees, and someone comes in, pays us the money, and gets assessed the fee. Once we're assessed that fee, we also have to put it back out on the other side. So that money does not come to Sun City West coffers. We take it in from one person and we give it out to another person. But that has absolutely no effect whatsoever on the community's bottom line. And anyone who has an accounting background would be able to see that.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, I'm going to read the recommendation one more time. The recommendation is in response to the recommendation from the Golf Committee to eliminate credit card fees for golf in lieu of increase of golf rates. The Budget and Finance Committee does not endorse or recommend approval. Okay, and I'd like to have we'll start with Christine.
Yes, I agree.
Frank?
Agreed?
John?
Agreed.
Agree
Dan?
again.
Susan?
Agreed.
David?
Agreed.
Gary? Okay, let the record show that it was a unanimous recommendation. Okay, I'd like to have comments, if we have any comments from the audience.
Excuse me, Dick. I still have a couple more slides.
Oh, I am so sorry.
It's just to kind of put a bow on everything, really. It really is. And you know what? This was only it wasn't my fault that this meeting ran long, but this is only like a 24-slide meeting.
You know that we had originally, our intent was to permit you to finish.
Yeah.
Our intent was to permit you to finish.
Yeah, okay.
I am very sorry.
It's totally fine. I love the discussion. I mean, I just think it's invaluable to the community. So I just got a couple more slides here, just kind of wrap everything up. And then, we in all of these discussions, like I said earlier, the reserve fund is essentially impacted by them. So wherever the governing board puts us at the end of the day, we'll be able to show what the impact of that will be to the reserve fund. So that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit about this estimated reserve fund allocation. And one of the questions came, can you elaborate on that and why we're doing it? So, of course, my financial brain went into, well, I explained the numbers, but the response to that was, but why? So here's why. And I want to touch on this because it's important. We want to eliminate that perception that the funds that are left over after operations is profit. In fact, we want to emphasize the fact that per policy FI 4.1, reserves are funded from the association's operating cash flow, determined using the association's annual audited financial statements. This is a key component of that because when you look at our overall funding, the whole pie chart, not operating income, but the overall funding, we've got roughly 14 million comes from membership. Okay? Roughly 11 million comes from golf. Roughly 5 million comes from APF fees. That total pie, and then, that's 94% of our overall funding, okay? That whole bucket funds not only our capital spend, but also our operations. So if we think about that funding as a whole, that's why it's important that after we pay for our operations, that there's money left over to inject into that reserve fund, because that helps pay for the repair and replacement of the items that are coming due, keeping the place looking nice, and also pays for new capital. And the new capital not only keeps the place looking nice, it also keeps it updated for new community members that are coming to the community. When you talk about some of the sports that are evolving, pickleball, things like that, library, maybe a restaurant, IT infrastructure, all this new kind of capital to help keep us vibrant and keep us in the top 10 or the best community. So the reserve fund is what this is all about. And we've got one policy, FI04, that talks about the reserve fund. And there's only one number that's set in stone, and it's 40%. We need to be 40% per policy of our fully funded balance. That reserve fund should at least cover 40% of that. And that's the only number that we have as we go through the financial planning process that we have to focus on. And how do we get there? Because 40% is the end of the line for us. So if we want to fund new capital, it doesn't come from that 40%. We need to think about funding new capital with whatever's over that 40%. Okay? So if we're looking at that, that's what this reserve fund allocation does. It calls out that portion that we're actually putting into the reserve fund, putting it down in the capital section, creating a balanced budget. Okay? And then we identify the amount needed in the reserve fund to pay for the repair and replacement as well as new capital improvements and stay within the FFB percentage per FI policy, FI04. So I wanted to get that out there because at the end of the day, it's the leftover cash from operations, and it goes into our reserve fund. Okay, so this committee tasked the governing board to decide or give them some direction or recommendation on what we want to do with dues increases. And I wanted to show the impact of what the golf increase was, and then the reduction in the credit card fees into the modeling. And at the end of the day, it was pretty much a wash, right? And if the recommendation and it passes, or the governing board votes on it, is to continue to pass those fees on, this modeling is not going to change very much. The only thing that's going to change in this modeling is when you're talking about dues and what the impact of those dues are. Christine brought up last committee meeting about the master plan, and that resides in that new capital spend line item there. So there's roughly 7.7 million in that new capital spend line item from 2024 through 2028. 400,000 of that automatically is allocated to allowances, because that's always new capital. It's things that aren't planned for. Sometimes it involves a reserve study item, but mostly new capital. So really you can take, 2 million off that. So you're really looking at 5.5 million in there for new capital. And you all know 5.5 million doesn't go as far as it used to in new capital. So we need to think about that as we're looking at this modeling and the impact of all the decisions that we're making. So this hasn't changed. Essentially, it's the same, and we're asking the governing board to, look within those increases. 3.5% to 5% is our recommendation, and that's the recommendation that was pushed forward. So. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Are there questions? Christine?
I know I'm talking a lot today. My apologies, team. But Ann and Cliff, you had spoken earlier about the current year projected FFB percentage, are we expecting that to be closer to 48 now?
Yeah, it could go to 48. We just don't model out valuation
Understood.
changes. Yes.
But the important thing that I believe it was David, whomever of you very esteemed folks came up with this last time, the metaphor of this being a very large battleship. When you look at the FFB percentage, it's not so much what happens next year, it's what happens 5 years out. So when we look at each of those differences, that $5 difference between these various recommendations that Gary was pointing out makes a really huge difference at the end. So that percentage at the end of the year, this year, I know you can't model it, but just we should bear that in mind, and realize that everything will model out accordingly. That's all.
So just a reminder that the 3 recommendations that we forwarded to the governing board was APFs, to project the APFs to 1,014, for credit cards, and we just validated our recommendation from that. And the 3rd recommendation was the increase of rates from 3.5% to 5%. So basically what we're seeing is, I think, validation of what we had felt from the beginning. David?
You know, I look at the 4.1 to 5.1%, and I reflect back on your reporting of how we're doing in terms of asset preservation fees. And simplistically, that extra $5 between 530 and 535 is 30 asset preservation fees. Okay, and that doesn't sound like a big number, but when we're struggling to make that 30 may be what pulls our fat out of the fire. So I would again encourage the board to think more of 535 than 530.
Yes, one of the 3 major funding sources.
Since we are talking about the reserve fund, obviously the projected expenses for next year, capital expenses, will have a big impact on that. And there's a handful in particular that I think that we need to be looking again at wants versus needs. And there's a number of items on here that are new spend. One is marked as remove and replace, that I question, do we really need to do this at this point, given that we're in a hole with APFs this year. No one can predict what's going to happen next year, but I wouldn't be overly optimistic. We've got things like shade structures. Are they really necessary, considering that we've lived with them for many, many years without them? We've got a $309,000 expense projected to change out the light bulbs in the pickleball courts, and yet no one can tell me how many people actually play there at night. I can say that I drove by there the other day. It was 7:20 in the morning. It was broad daylight. The lights were on full blast on all the courts, and there was not one person playing. And so I question, are we actually managing what we have correctly? I mean, a timer needed to be reset, but no one had done it. I suspect it's been done now because I submitted a member comment form. I think that it behooves us to look once again. I don't know if we can make any difference at this point, but there's a number of capital improvement items on the projected budget that are new that I think that should come off.
Christine, any comments?
When will we discuss some of the capital items, or is this the meeting where we
I
will?
think we've been there. You know, I think we have, when we submitted our recommendation, our 3 recommendations,
Okay.
we satisfied that.
Okay, so we will not, there will not be any further discussion about the new spend for next year and so forth.
I don't have that on the agenda anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Donato? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you, Christine?
There is a sheet with capital items on it. Are we skipping that then? There is a slide.
There is.
That's what Cliff just went over.
Okay.
So the capital items will, I've been talking with Karen, and she is also tasking the board with looking at these items because the way we approve these items are in gross. So if any of these need to be pulled out and discussed, like I think the pickleball lighting is being pulled out to be discussed individually. And I would say that if there's something else that needs to be maybe pulled out, discussed individually, that this might be the place to start that conversation.
What I'd like to do is to move this to the agenda for next BNF.
Okay.
We've been here over
right.
2 hours, and I think that we'll do it at next, we'll put this on the agenda.
Will do.
For the next BNF meeting. Okay.
And that'll fit within the timeline of the recommendation.
Great.
So, yep, that fits right in the window.
Thank you. Mr. Bignato, anything else? Okay. Mr. Hobald?
One comment regarding the FFB in the modeling. First of all, I really appreciate this. The modeling, it's well done, it's well thought out, and as most of us know, models do a very good job of simplifying a very complex world in a way that people can understand it and see what levers there are to pull, buttons to push, and this does that very well. So that's my my comment and my attaboy for the modeling that we're shown. I would also say that between the 3.5% and the 5.1% range, I'm very comfortable personally looking out 5 years. I expect all of these numbers to wiggle around a little bit. There's an assumption in there about investment change in future years that we have no control over, but you have to do something. Yeah. And you've done something, and I applaud you for having the courage to put these numbers out for all of us to chew on. And I'm very comfortable with that range looking out. I think we're being well managed financially. I believe we're doing our jobs of staying the course and trying to stay, I guess the metaphor I would use is we're driving a car down a mountain road. We can make mistakes. We can steer into the mountain, and that's not good. That's called an accident. But we could also go off the cliff, and that's a much more serious accident. So I believe we're doing a very good job of guiding ourselves as a community down the middle of the road, and I think we're doing a very good job of trying to balance the user fees versus the membership fees. And it's a struggle. Anytime you get taxes or fees involved in a discussion and somebody starts using the word fair, I start grabbing my pocket. There is no such thing as fair. It's in the eye of the beholder. So that said, I'm very happy with where we're at, and I want to be on record as saying that.
Isn't that where they sell cotton candy?
Ms. Brown?
One thing I would like to see, because it's hard for me to flip back to what are our golf fees now in every category? What was the original proposal in the budget? And what was the percentage increase? And now what is the new proposal? So I can look at now to the new proposal and how much are we going up? Is that possible for us to see at the board meeting on Thursday?
Yes, I'll adjust the presentation from this committee's recommendation.
Because I'm fear it's going up much more than I think it was going up if we add in a blanket amount for the credit card fees. And I want to be able to see that for myself. I may be wrong, because I've been wrong a lot of times.
What's going up?
The golf fee, I fear the percentage is going up with the new layer that we're adding on to the golf increase. I want to see what it's going up from this current
Yes,
to original proposal to new proposal.
Yeah, there is an increase, but it's not that much, and you'll see that.
Okay, and the dues modeling, as I recall, we were projecting 48% this year for the FFB at the end of the year. You're showing 49 on this.
Yes.
Is that,
So
should this
the
one be updated, or?
I don't on the modeling. I don't show valuation changes because I don't know. That's 700,000 negative in the reserve fund could swing the other way next month.
Okay.
So I don't put that in there. But at the end, based on the current $722,000 reserve fund valuation change, that's why it's coming down
Okay.
to 49. But it'll be right by the end of the year, whatever it is.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Ms. Redmond?
I guess I'd like to thank you and your staff, Cliff, for all the work you're doing in terms of changing assumptions, et cetera, on this budget. Actually, the initial planning of the first go-round, and then, the changing of the assumptions, which help us to make sound decisions. And thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Cliff, because as I was shooting emails off to you over the weekend and you were sending me stuff back on Saturday morning, I appreciate that. I have a question that's totally unrelated to the credit card discussion. When you talked about the categories that our employees fall to in terms of wages, can you tell me what our average hourly wage is for our full-time employees compared to the minimum wage?
I can get that to you. I think our average just overall wages is I would say probably about 45,000 a year, which would be about $20 an hour, $21 an hour in whole. But as far as a breakout from salary to hourly, I'd have to work on that.
Okay.
But I can get it.
Okay, and then the healthcare costs, someone made a comment and you responded back to that question that, well, that was workman's comp that was driving that. But I thought I remembered when the person came and did the presentation that we had some on healthcare, not workman's comp, that we had some very large claims in our healthcare insurance that was driving the premiums compared to past years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So there is the potential, although I've never seen any of these guys decrease rates.
Yeah.
There is the potential that if we have a run where we don't have a lot of serious claims, we could see a decrease in rates.
Yes, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big if, but.
Yes.
Okay, anyway, that's all I got. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Bosak?
My only thought is that it should probably be something that we start right now, but it's going to take one heck of a communication plan to sell the community on the urgency to take some of the actions that we're taking. I mean, they don't look at this stuff. They trust us to make the right decisions and protect the community, and that's what our job is. But it's going to take because you're going to get 32 people again at your community forums. But all the vehicles that we have at our disposal, we just need to reach out with the logic, the understanding, what the options are. Keep thinking about this e-check thing, putting money on your membership card. I mean, all that sort of thing. I use those in conversation with these people I talked to last week about the credit card. And then he's, oh yeah, I guess I can do that. That's no big deal. Not all of them, but a large percentage of them. They're reasonable people. They understand that the community needs their help right now, and they want to keep it the way it is. And that is the silent majority. We got to make sure we always remember that.
Yeah, and Bill is working on because Bill kind of heads up the community forums, and we've got a slide deck going with all kinds of great data and information and alternatives, and that'll certainly be in there.
And my point is we can't wait for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we should start shoving stuff out via the Rec Center News, any other online issues that we got, just educating people about, they know what the issues are, the word's out there on this credit card thing, and the more we can explain and make a case for them, the better it will be accepted and the less aggravation we'll all have to go through.
Understood.
I think in closing, I would like to make a couple comments. I think that we've had an incredibly valuable discussion today regarding the credit card fees and the entire credit card concept. But I think the other thing that we did is when we'll submit the recommendation, but we're validating what our original 3 recommendations were, you know, and that was to change the number of APFs, the projection. It was the credit card assessment, or the credit card, passing on the credit card fees, and the dues, the range of the dues. Although I would like to see it in the higher end, that's my opinion, and not necessarily the committee's opinion, because of my concern for the percent of the reserve fund. So at that, one more time, we'll open it up to the floor. Mr. Schwinn, did you have something for us?
I do, and I don't want to extend this meeting any longer than I have to, but I think we're getting to a point now that this is somewhat important.
Hi, welcome.
First step, I just want to thank you all for everything that you do and the services that you provide. This committee is really a benefit to us. And if I can, we talked a little bit about money flow and some of the things that you approved and the governing board approved. We are about to spend about $4.5 million on some irrigation work over in Grandview. Also, almost close to $2 million in turf repair. But if you've been near the facility or driven by town, you may have seen large stacks of 50-foot sections of pipe. If you have any experience at all with irrigation or PVC pipe, sleeves, glue, put them together, that type of thing, this is a completely different process, and I think it's worth seeing. And I just want to let you know that the company that we have out here working, Landscapes Unlimited, is the only company that Augusta National lets in their gates. So they are very, very well respected. We are going to see a large number of employees coming in here over the next couple of weeks. The first week in April, things really get going. Open trenches. And so this has recently been posted as of today, I believe, on our webpage. But we really need to make sure people stay off the back 9 while these folks are out there. There's a lot of personal carts out there. We don't need any more supervision than is really already out there. And so just from a safety perspective, don't fall in any holes. Don't watch out for open trenches as this thing progresses. But we have about 12 miles of pipe that they're assembling. And this is just an interesting step on how these pipes, large pipes, get fused. It's a pretty cool concept. Enjoy it.
Dan Ahi, I'm the superintendent at Grandview Golf Course, which is where we are now on number 1 tee. You're looking at the pipe staging of the main line for our upcoming irrigation installation project this summer. I'm going to go through the process of the pipe fusion that we're doing. So with this HDPE pipe, it comes in 50-foot sticks, and first they put them in the machine and they clamp each side of the pipe, and they will put a blade on it which squares both ends of the pipe. And once both ends are squared and meet flushly, they will bring down a heater plate which is set at a certain temperature, and they heat the pipe, and once it reaches a certain temperature and a proper size bead is formed, they remove the heat plate, and then they use the fusing machine to push the pipe together under a certain high pressure for another certain amount of time. And then once that has cooled and completed, the pipe fusion process is done. So another thing about this HDPE pipe is that it's very environmentally friendly. A lot of people like to work with it. It's got a very long life. Once this is in the ground, it will last probably up to 100 years easily. So a great lifespan. It's very flexible, so you can move it around trees and any obstacles that you need. And basically when it's all fused together, it's going to be one long continuous pipe without any fittings. So it's very strong. The actual fusion, where the fusing takes place, is stronger than the actual pipe. So there again, that'll give us long life and hopefully no leaks.
Will be filmed like this. We're going to document that, but it's really nice what they do. And then when they adhere the laterals to that to bring those out to the fairway for sprinkler heads, that'll all be filmed as well. But it's a really neat process, and we are very glad to be underway. But things are really picking up now, and especially in April. And they're anticipating probably doing a hole a day. So it's, I mean, excuse me, a hole a week. So it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, so moving forward, but anyway, your money hard at work. Thank you.
You know, they had this machine set up behind my house on number 6 on Grandview, and so I hauled my lawn chair out into the back of my yard and watched these guys. I mean, it was just a machine. Wham those two things together and run them through the machine, and then they have a little skid loader that drags the things down until they put the next section. And they did a lot of pipe in basically one day. I mean, it was really moving fast. So.
Very nice.
Can I come to your house and watch that? Because that's really cool. There you go. I'll pay cash, though.
Interesting point too is you heard him say that pipe's a 100-year pipe. So this will have a reserve study impact because we're basically getting. I think Pete's going to do an analysis on this, but I think we have that original stuff on at 30 to 40 years, and now that's going to basically, go on at 100 years. So there will be a positive impact to the reserve study from this pipe. So and Pete's working on that information, so we'll present that at some other meeting, but something to keep in mind.
Do we have any other comments from the board? If not, it is 7:26.